welcome to the first episode of Haley's History Adventures on our project for Love, Lust, and Sexual Desire, the U.S. Presidency in the Bedroom. So, just as a preface, I will be looking at my notes, which is why my eyes are not looking at the camera. And it looks a little awkward, but I have no other way to do it, and I don't know how to fix that. So, anyways, without further ado, let's jump into it. So, when John F. Kennedy first took the oath of office in 1961, he became the 35th person to ever hold the position of the President of the United States. He also became famous for being the youngest person to ever be elected to the position. During the 3 years that he served as president, he infused the Oval Office with a great deal of new energy and life. He is acknowledged for having played a significant role in the establishment of the Peace Corps and with having contributed to averting World War III by effectively de-escalating the Cuban Missile Crisis. In fact, JFK's resume is strikingly impressive. After graduating from Harvard University, he went on to serve in the U.S. Army during World War II, where he became a war hero by earning the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for extremely heroic conduct in 1994. In that same year, he also earned a Purple Heart for injuries suffered in combat. After his time in the Navy, JFK went on to briefly serve as a journalist for the Chicago American Herald, and a year later he was elected as congressman in Massachusetts, and later as the senator. After that, JFK went straight into the Oval Office. During his time as president, JFK fought to promote equal rights and opportunity for all Americans by proposing a civil rights bill that passed in 1964 as the Civil Rights Act. He urged Americans to help others who are less fortunate than they are, both at home and overseas, by investing in Latin America through the Alliance for Progress. He challenged the country to achieve the unthinkable and place a man on the moon before the end of the decade by seeking congressional approval for a $22 million Apollo project. And finally, he co-signed a treaty limiting nuclear testing and rebuilding a relationship with Russia. JFK is most remembered for his many achievements and for the unfortunate end to his life on November 22nd, 1963. But the 35th president's wildly impressive resume also extended within the bedroom. JFK was arguably the most prolific philanderer in the history of the United States. Despite the fact that he worked very hard to cultivate the public's perception of him as a family-oriented individual, Kennedy had relationships with a large number of women during his marriage, ranging from blonde, bombshell Hollywood types like Marilyn Monroe to White House interns with disturbing links to the Mafia and the Soviets. Marilyn Monroe was undoubtedly one of Kennedy's lovers. Just to preface, get that out of the way, that is essentially confirmed at this point. But interestingly, although Kennedy preferred blonde women, he was famously married to the dazzling and gorgeous brunette Jackie Kennedy. Jackie did not have an entirely naive perspective on her husband's extramarital affairs. After all, she was highly intelligent and was aware of all of his countless affairs. But she made herself feel better about them by convincing herself that John would always come back to her in the end. She probably just believed that it was something that someone of her rank had to put up with, because extramarital relationships were pretty prevalent among powerful men during that time period, as it was just sort of a status thing. The womanizing that JFK engaged in was even planned. It was well known that he hired a special aide named Dave Powers, whose major responsibility it was to find attractive ladies who were open to having sexual encounters with the president. Even going so far as to employ the Secret Service, JFK would smuggle women in and out of the White House at will. What a blatant use of one person's political privilege. I think that's pretty obvious, but I did not know that. JFK even said, quote, sorry, Mr. King, for sort of cursing, quote, I get a migraine headache if I don't get a strange piece of ass every day. Now that we have gotten that out of the way, Sorry for saying that again, Mr. King. I want to dive into the story of all of Kennedy's affairs, or at least the confirmed ones. So buckle up because it's a long list. First up, I think we should start with Marilyn Monroe. She's probably the most well-known and most iconic affair of Kennedy's, but it is a very interesting story. So, for a long time, information about JFK's connection with Marilyn Monroe was pretty speculative, but more recently, information has emerged that suggests the two undoubtedly had an intimate relationship that went beyond platonic friendliness. In February 1962, JFK and Marilyn Monroe met in New York City. The two engaged in a passionate relationship, almost from the beginning. The president and his Hollywood mistress tried to keep their relationship as secretive as they could, in order to prevent the media from learning about what was happening. They would mostly meet up at a common friend's house, Bing Crosby's home in Palm Springs, but over time, Monroe reportedly began to have fantasies of one day holding the position of First Lady. Juicy, I know. She apparently even sent Jackie a letter outlining her goals. Additionally, it's also said that JFK's brother, Robert Kennedy, had a more prolonged relationship with Monroe, which is also gross. Some people have even suggested that Bobby planned Monroe's murder and staged it to seem like a suicide. But again, that's all speculation, and I honestly don't really believe it. But I also should note that I can't do much of a deep dive into every single one of JFK's relationships with these women because it would take hours, and I don't think the specific details of each one is necessarily important to warrant such time, but I will talk in the most depth about the ones that I believe are most important. On that note, up next is Judith Exeter. JFK had a close acquaintance of the Rat Pack, a renowned group of mobsters and performers, before he became president of the United States. He had tight relationships with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., both of whom were Rat Packers. He apparently maintained a channel of contact with them that both opened and advantageous politically with mafia mobsters while in office. Sinatra introduced Kennedy to Judith Campbell Exner, a former girlfriend of a Chicago crime leader, Sam Guianera. I can't say his name. During a gala held at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas in 1960. At that point, John and Judith had began a relationship that lasted the whole of JFK's presidency. Once in office, Judith frequented the White House and apparently had a long-lasting relationship with the president. Exner would shockingly subsequently assert that she had been in charge of acting as a courier to deliver goods for the president to Guianera, the Chicago crime boss. However, it should be emphasized that these assertions were never proven and are just speculation from her own words. A Senate committee would later question Exner in depth regarding her relationship with JFK. She was among the first to openly reveal the late president's more sinister side. She was among the first to... During Operation Mongoose, a clandestine intelligence operation designed to undermine Fidel Castro's communist government in Cuba, the Kennedy administration is known to have consistently coordinated with organized crime. The president's relationship with Judith may have served as the foundation for this covert operation. Next in line is Ellen Romovich. Ellen, a native of East Germany, was married to Rolf Romovich, a German Air Force sergeant stationed in Washington during the height of the Cold War. She also worked as a call girl for a number of famous people, including reportedly JFK. She was one of several prostitutes Dave Powers hired to perform sex acts for the president. Romovich was allegedly a communist spy who was expelled from the country in August 1963 at Bobby Kennedy's request. According to another report, it's unclear what, if any, valuable information was uncovered by Romovich and was passed on to the Russians. But I have no doubt that Kennedy probably said something in the confines of their relationship. Next up is Gene Tierney. JFK had a thing for Hollywood actors, as you probably guessed. Gene Tierney, an actress who was still married to her first husband, fashion designer Olga Kasani, when she began an affair with JFK sometime about 1948. She was reportedly one of his most frequent flings. I will say that I find it incredibly ironic and very funny, but Jackie actually used to wear quite a lot of Olga Kasani, which is Gene Tierney's husband's, clothing for her entire public life. And maybe it was a way to stab him in the back and make a point. I'm not sure, but I do find that a little funny. And they actually were friends, which is a little sad and makes sense, but I just thought that would be interesting to note. The next one is more controversial and gives very much Bill Clinton vibes, if you know what I mean. Mimi Alford, then 19 years old, met JFK while swimming in the White House pool only a few days after beginning her job there. He approached her and introduced himself before later that day sending her an invitation for drinks after work. As it turned out, JFK volunteered to give her a tour of the White House, which turned into a very intimate tour of the home, which concluded with him seducing her in what he humorously referred to as Miss Kennedy's room. She claims in her book that she was in shock after the experience, which was her first time having sex. He, on the other hand, behaved as if what had just happened was the most normal thing in the world, and was very matter-of-fact. This was the beginning of an 18-month-long relationship during which she never addressed him as Jack, and always as Mr. President, as she revealed in her book. Alford made some troubling revelations regarding her and JFK's relationship a number of years ago. For starters, she said that the president had used illicit recreational drugs while she was with him. She further said that JFK had challenged her to perform sexual acts while in the White House walled pool with his personal aide, Dave Powers. JFK was 45, while Mimi was 19. Next, we have Marlene Dietrich. In 1962, Marlene, an actress and singer, had a brief affair with JFK. Years later, Dietrich would recall that because of how brief their romance was, she found it difficult to recall the majority of the specifics of what's transpired, which honestly is about the worst excuse I could probably imagine. I mean, like, seriously, who forgets their affair with the most powerful man on the planet? I just don't buy it at all, and no one bought her story then either, but what can you do? In addition to dating the president, Dietrich also dated Joseph P. Kennedy, JFK's father, for a very long time. Which, again, I don't really mean to be judgy, but that is just really gross. Like, really, 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 really gross. Next, we have Mary Mayer. JFK and Mary Pinchot Mayer had a rather well-known relationship. She also was shot and murdered in rather mysterious circumstances a year after his death. It has been hypothesized that she was killed in order to keep her from disclosing the specifics of their relationships, as she could have known something regarding JFK's murders or the death that someone didn't want the public to know, which is very spooky but entirely speculation, and there's no real evidence to say that that is fact, but just a fun conspiracy theory that I came across. Next, we have the duo, which was known as Fiddle and Faddle, which is Priscilla Ware and Jill Cohen, who were, again, both White House secretaries. According to reports, the Kennedy administration appointed these two secretaries primarily so that they could skinny dip with the president in the swimming pool at the White House. These two ladies were more well known for their proximity to the president than for their hard work, as a former Secret Service agent told Camelot author Ronald Chrysler, quote, "Neither did much work." According to Caitlin Flanagan's Atlantic article, both reportedly frequently left work to go skinny dipping in the pool with JFK and would return to their stations with wet hair, which is very funny. She also claims that the women traveled with him on business trips to places like Berlin, Rome, Ireland, Costa Rica, Mexico, Nassau, everywhere practically. Jackie Kennedy once saw Priscilla while giving a tour to a reporter for Paris match of the White House. Jackie allegedly informed the reporter in French that that was the woman who was having an affair with her husband. Next up is Pamela Turner. According to The Kennedy Half Century by Larry J. Sabato, Pamela Turner, the press secretary for the First Lady, Jackie Kennedy, is also said to have had a brief fling with her boss's husband. Turner, who is said to have resembled Jackie remarkably, started an intimate relationship with JFK in 1961 when she was 21 years old. Even JFK's wife is said to have been urged to hire her after she served as JFK's personal secretary when he was a senator. So basically, when he got elected, he asked JFK to bring her with them to the White House. Next, we have Vanilla von Post. A Swedish socialite, Vanilla von Post, is said to have started an illicit relationship with the president in 1953 and continued for 6 years. These assertions were made in her biography, Love, Jack. When the young Swede was 21 years old and JFK was 36, they first met when both were vacationing on the French Riviera. She described the evening in her biography saying, quote, "He turned and kissed me tenderly, and my breath was taken away. The brightness of the moon and stars made his eyes appear bluer than the ocean beneath us." JFK and Jackie were engaged to be married in 3 weeks when this first occurred. But they kept in contact and ran into each other again 2 days later. According to Von Post, Kennedy called his father and said he wanted to break up with Jackie to be with her instead, but he received advice that such a scandal would endanger his political career. Trust me, there is more. Next up, we have actress Angie Dickinson. Frank Sinatra also introduced Angie Dickinson to JFK prior to 1960 in the Democratic Convention. Dickinson and Kennedy first connected at a gathering hosted by Pat Kennedy's sister in Santa Monica. Dickinson later joined the presidential race. According to author Jed Mercaro's book, American Adulterer, Dickinson complained about the fact that Kennedy couldn't last in bed for very long, which I find quite ironic for the serial cheater. Next up, we have Blaze Starr. Miss Starr is a very well-known celebrity stripper, and she revealed to People magazine in 1989 that she briefly dated the president-elect Kennedy before his election and intended to do so after he took office. They allegedly met when JFK visited her Maryland strip club, Crossroads, as a congressman in 1954. The two initially became acquainted. It is reported that the famous burlesque dancer was dissatisfied when the Cuban Missile Crisis prevented her from having an affair with the president in the Lincoln Room. In a 1989 interview, Starr referred to Kennedy as, quote, very quick and very wild, noting that he, quote, knew exactly what he was doing with girls, so it didn't take him long. No, that bad back didn't faze him. Some honorable mentions are Inga Arvad, which JFK had a long-term relationship with, and Arvad was when he was serving in the Navy. She allegedly worked as a spy for the Soviet Union. Another one. Kennedy's father, who was worried about the impact Kennedy's connection to Arvad might have on his political career, was the catalyst for their final breakup. Next is Astrid Ekberg. Ekberg, a worldwide sex icon, temporarily linked to the president through her leading part in Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita, is most recognized for her work in that film. Little more is known about their connection, but there is pretty strong rumors and evidence to conclude that they were engaged at some point. So yeah, wow, that was definitely a long list. And I would honestly bet my life that there are more that we don't know about, and there were more that I came across that I didn't choose to mention because I didn't think that the evidence and information was concrete enough to talk about, and I can't assert that the validity of those claims are 100% true, so I didn't think that it was fair to speak about them when I don't really know. But honestly, I was so shocked by the information that I found in my research. I mean, how many affairs can one guy have? And I might add that 90% of these occurred while he was in the White House, and all of them occurred while he was married. So, take that as you will. I mean, honestly, I can't even imagine something like this happening today, and it would be a total uproar. But that's only if it got out. And here's the juicy part. I'm sure that many in the time when JFK was president knew, because there are too many conflicting and witnesses to what has gone on. I mean, hell, Jackie even told a reporter at the White House about one of the affairs with one of his interns. But I think that everyone chose not to know. Because if you look at Marilyn Monroe's Happy Birthday, Mr. President, I think that made it abundantly clear to absolutely everyone that there was something going on. But what's interesting is that his other affairs weren't talked about, and nor was his affair with Marilyn Monroe that seriously discussed. I mean, literally everyone knew about JFK's affairs in the press. Everyone in the White House knew, and even Jackie knew. But there was an incentive to keep quiet. As Barbara Perry from the University of Virginia says, quote, "One reason is that the press was mostly male and had an unspoken pact to keep quiet about the private encounters they saw or heard about. During this time, most wealthy and powerful people, more specifically men, but sometimes women, had affairs all the time. It practically came with wealth and status, so it was no surprise that he was doing this. And honestly, if JFK got hate for it, then everyone in power would have that, and that's not what they wanted." This is also the reason that Jackie stayed with JFK for so long. Reportedly, all these affairs ruined Jackie and absolutely tore her apart, as you could probably imagine. But honestly, one of the reasons she stayed is because she felt that he would always come back to her, which is so sad. And I'm sure you can imagine that their marriage was pretty horrible. Jackie was incredibly scared that JFK would give her an STD, and even reportedly blamed him for one of her miscarriages. Jackie really, really wanted a divorce from JFK, and the sad part is that that would probably have ruined his political career. And it's rumored that JFK's father offered Jackie over $1 million to stay with him until he was out of office. Obviously, JFK's assassination came before that could happen, so nonetheless, their marriage was not even close to the appearance that they showed on the outside on television. Although JFK and Jackie Kennedy's relationship was honestly something out of a romantic horror story, Jackie did eventually get her fairy tale. She got remarried to Aristotle Onassis in 1968, just 5 years after JFK's death, for which she got a lot of hate for, but honestly, good for her. And they had a really lovely marriage, although it was short. He died in 1975 after ill health, and obviously Jackie was again distraught. After that, she never married again, but she did grow very close to a man named Morris Temple's man, who cared for Jackie in the last 12 years of her life. And she reportedly died happy and at peace with her life. Jackie did many amazing things for the country and for the world, and her generosity continued after she left the White House. Jackie, despite all that she went through, was an extremely kind and generous woman who deserves to be celebrated for all she did and not pitied for all she went through. And that is the story of JFK and Jackie Kennedy. I honestly don't have words for all of what I just went through. And I have learned so much more about the president that I didn't want to know. But nonetheless, I think that it's an important story to think about because this is the guy that was leading our country at the time. And I gotta say, he probably wasn't a good guy. And as much as I do like JFK, he was one of the great presidents, I think, in history. He's definitely going to be remembered. I mean, he was assassinated on the job very, very publicly, and he was prolific for one, his looks. He was stunning to people at the time. He was like every woman's dream. But he was also good at his job, and he did it well for the most part. But he didn't do well by his family. And I don't know. I have no judgments on whether that makes him a good or a bad president. But I do think that it's important to know. And I do feel bad for Jackie, even though, she did live a good life after that, and I'm glad that she remarried, but I'm sure that all those affairs definitely had an effect on her. And, well, JFK was JFK, and he never hid it from anyone, so I can give him props there, but, it is a little sad. But, yeah, that is all I have for JFK. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good night or afternoon. Bye.